I hid my silver eyes behind a veil until the Alpha King tore it away. In the cold morning air, the kingdom below was still, silent except for the distant murmur of the forest. Among the noble houses, whispers spread like wildfire about a girl with silver eyes, eyes that were said to see both the truth and the lies of the world. Alara stood before her mirror in her chamber, adjusting the thin veil that hid her face. She hated it, and yet she feared the consequences of removing it. Her silver eyes were a gift and a curse, one that could bring awe or doom. She could see things others could not, glimpses of the future, the shadows of people's hearts, the faintest trace of magic lingering in the air. She had learned long ago that some secrets were safer kept hidden. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Hide what makes you different, Alara. They will not understand, they will fear. And so she wore the veil, a delicate piece of silk, every day. She moved through the castle with quiet grace, speaking little and observing much. Nobles whispered when she passed, their eyes lingering on the hidden mystery that she carried. Guards avoided her gaze, unsure whether to fear or respect her. And still, she remained alone, wrapped in silence, her heart beating with a mixture of longing and caution. Today, however, would not be like other days. A letter had arrived in the dead of night, sealed with the mark of Ashenfell itself, the sigil of King Kaelin. Its contents were simple but chilling. Appear at the court. Your presence is requested. Alara felt her pulse quicken. The Alpha King, ruler of all Ashenfell, was a man shrouded in fear and legend. He was ruthless in battle, cunning in politics, and rumored to have the ability to sense the hidden truths in people's hearts. Many whispered that he could see into the soul itself. To be summoned by him was both a dangerous honor and a terrifying ordeal. She fastened the veil more tightly around her face, as if the fabric could protect her from his scrutiny. I have no choice, she whispered to herself, staring at the reflection of the girl she had tried to hide from the world. The girl with silver eyes, veiled and yet waiting for something she did not yet understand. The court of Ashenfell was vast and cold, its ceilings stretching high into shadowed arches. Tapestries depicting battles long past hung on the walls, their threads shimmering faintly with enchanted light. Nobles gathered in murmuring clusters, their eyes shifting nervously toward the throne as Alara entered. She felt the weight of countless gazes, some curious, some fearful, and she kept her head bowed, letting the veil shield her expression. At the center of the hall sat King Kaelin, draped in dark silk embroidered with silver threads that seemed to capture the faint light of the enchanted hall. His presence was commanding, not just because of his position, but because of the way he seemed to fill every corner of the room. His eyes, sharp and dark, scanned the assembly, stopping finally on Alara. It was as if time had slowed. The crowd seemed to vanish, leaving only her and him. She felt the air change, heavy with anticipation and something unspoken, something she could not name. You wear your veil well, his voice echoed through the hall, smooth yet carrying a note of curiosity that made her heart flutter. But tell me, what do you hide behind it? Alara's hands trembled slightly. She had prepared for many things, fear, judgment, rejection, but not this. The way he spoke, the way his eyes held hers without faltering, it was as though he could see through everything. And perhaps, she realized with a shiver, he already did. I hide nothing, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yet even as the words left her lips, she knew they were not true. She hid everything, her fears, her powers, her truths. Kaelin's lips curved into a faint smile, almost teasing. We shall see, he murmured. Then, with a subtle motion of his hand, he gestured for her to come closer. Alara's feet moved as if guided by a force stronger than her own will. She felt exposed, her veil a thin barrier against his gaze. And yet there was a strange comfort in the intensity of his eyes, a pull she could not resist. When she reached the throne, he leaned slightly forward, his dark eyes studying her face. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and lifted the veil. Alara gasped as her silver eyes met his, unshielded, unhidden. The hall fell silent. A chill passed through her veins, and for a moment she feared she had revealed too much. But instead of fear or judgment, there was understanding, recognition even. "You are stronger than you know," Kalen said softly, "and yet you fear your own strength. Why?" Alara's lips parted, but no words came. How could she explain that the visions, the whispers, the shadows she saw were a burden she could not share? That her eyes were both a blessing and a cage. "You hide behind a veil," he continued, "but the world has a way of tearing veils away." His voice was gentle, yet filled with authority, a paradox that left her unsteady. "Tell me, will you allow yourself to be seen?" She looked down, uncertain. Her heart raced with a strange mix of fear and desire. To be truly seen was dangerous. To be truly seen by him was something she had never imagined. Before she could answer, a sudden sound erupted from the hall, a shout, a clatter of armor. Guards rushed past, speaking urgently about a disturbance in the northern forest. Kalen's eyes, however, did not leave hers. "Go," he said, finally breaking the gaze. "But remember this, your eyes are not just silver. They are a key, a weapon, and a shield. Do not hide them from the world forever." Alara bowed and retreated to her chamber, her mind racing. She had been seen, truly seen, by the most powerful man in the kingdom. And instead of fear, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, curiosity, longing, and a dangerous hope. That night the moon hung low over Ashenfell, casting pale light through her chamber windows. Alara sat at the sill, the veil resting in her lap. Her silver eyes reflected the moonlight, shimmering like liquid silver. She thought of Kalen, of the way he had lifted the veil, of the way he had looked at her, not with fear, not with awe, but with something deeper, something she could not name. Her visions flickered at the edges of her mind. Shadows of the future, fleeting and uncertain, danced before her eyes. She saw the forest, the castle, and herself, standing with the Alpha King, facing dangers she could not yet understand. And yet there was a thread of hope woven into the shadows, a promise that perhaps she was not alone in this. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was her handmaiden, a quiet girl named Myra. "Are you well, my lady?" Myra asked, her voice gentle. "The king, he did not frighten you," Alara shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He sees things I hide even from myself." Myra's eyes widened. "The king, but he is feared by all. You," she hesitated, unsure how to speak the truth. "You are different, my lady." "Yes," Alara said softly. "And now he knows it too." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, their leaves rustling like whispered secrets. Alara felt the weight of the veil in her lap, the weight of her silver eyes, and the weight of something else, a connection, a spark, a pull she could not ignore. The next day she was summoned again, this time to the gardens of Ashenfell Castle. The sun filtered through mist and leaves, painting everything in silver and green. Kalen was waiting alone beside a fountain that shimmered with magic. "You have questions," he said without preamble. "I can see them in your eyes." Alara hesitated. "I do," she admitted. "But I do not know if I am ready for the answers." Kalen's gaze softened, yet the intensity remained. "Answers are never given, they are revealed. And sometimes revelation is the only way to survive." Alara felt a shiver of anticipation. Something was about to change. Something beyond the veil, beyond fear, beyond the walls of the castle. And for the first time in her life, she felt as if the world itself were waiting for her to step into it. The Alpha King extended his hand, not in command, but in invitation. And for the first time, Alara felt the pull of something she had hidden even from herself, the dangerous, thrilling possibility of being seen and perhaps of being understood. Cliffhanger. Her hand hovered over his, trembling with fear and desire. The silver eyes behind the veil shone in the morning light, revealing a destiny neither of them could yet name. The sun had barely risen over Ashenfell Castle, Yet the gardens were alive with whispers of leaves and the distant cries of birds. Alara walked among the fountains and marble statues, her silver eyes hidden beneath the familiar veil. Yet her thoughts were restless, turning constantly to the Alpha King, Kalen, and the strange pull she felt toward him. It was not fear that lingered in her chest, though fear still existed, but curiosity and something far more dangerous, fascination. He had seen her, truly seen her, and yet he had not recoiled. That alone made her heart beat unevenly, like the wings of a caged bird. Kalen emerged from the shadows of the garden, as though he had been waiting for her all along. His black cloak swept the path behind him, and the morning light caught the silver embroidery along the edges. He walked with a purpose that seemed effortless, but every step commanded attention. "Alara," he said, his voice low, steady, and entirely controlled. "You are late." I was not sure I should come," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not ready." "Ready for what?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. His dark eyes, sharp and probing, searched hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "For being seen," she whispered. Kalen smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "Seen," he repeated. "There is a difference between being seen and being understood. One frightens, the other demands courage." Alara's fingers tightened around the veil. Courage. She had little left of it after years of hiding her eyes, of hiding herself. But he, this king, this powerful, enigmatic man, stirred something within her. She felt exposed, yet alive. "Then I must learn courage," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. "Good," Kalen said, taking a step closer. The air seemed heavier when he approached, as though the space between them were charged with unseen energy. Because Ashenfell is a kingdom built on secrets, and secrets demand those who are brave enough to hold them. Alara looked away, toward the fountains that glimmered in the morning light. The water rippled, reflecting silver like her eyes, and she felt the faintest tremor of magic stir within her. Her visions, fleeting and unpredictable, had begun to grow stronger since the veil had been lifted. She did not speak of them, though. Not yet. She did not know if she could trust him with the truth of what she saw. Shadows of danger, echoes of betrayal, glimpses of a future she could not control. Kalen, as though reading her thoughts, placed a hand lightly on her arm. "I do not ask for trust blindly, Alara. But I do ask for honesty. One cannot stand in this kingdom if their truths are hidden." Alara shivered under his touch, a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. It was not fear alone, nor comfort, but something suspended between them, a tension that made her chest ache. "I will try," she said finally, "but I cannot promise everything." He nodded slowly. "That is enough, for now." Days passed in a tense rhythm. Alara attended court gatherings and council meetings, each encounter a test of her ability to hide, to observe, to survive. And yet, Kalen watched her always in ways that made her heart beat unevenly. Sometimes it was subtle, a glance across the hall, a tilt of his head when she spoke. Other times it was undeniable, a hand extended, a question asked, an observation that showed he knew more than he should. The nobles whispered constantly. Some envied her courage, others feared her power. But Alara paid little attention to them. Her mind was consumed with one thought, the man who had torn away her veil. One evening, as twilight painted the castle in hues of deep purple and silver, Alara wandered the northern gardens alone. The mist from the fountains swirled around her ankles, soft and cold. The air smelled of dew and magic, faintly electric. She had come seeking solitude, a moment to gather her thoughts, but she found herself thinking of Kalen instead. "Lost in thought," a voice said behind her. She turned sharply. Kalen stood there, hands behind his back, a faint smile on his lips. "I did not hear you approach," she admitted, startled. "Nor did I wish to startle you," he said softly. "But you have a tendency to wander into places where shadows linger. Perhaps you like the shadows more than you care to admit." Alara frowned. "I do not fear shadows," she said. "I simply watch them. "Watch them," he repeated, stepping closer. "And yet they watch you in return. Perhaps you are stronger than the shadows themselves." She looked at him, unsure what to say. He spoke as though he understood the very core of her being, yet she did not know if it was truth or manipulation. And yet she felt drawn to him, as if some unseen thread tied them together. "The northern forest," she said, changing the subject. "It sometimes speaks to me." "Ah," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "And what does it say?" Alara hesitated. It warns of danger, of betrayal, and sometimes it shows things I cannot prevent." Kalen's expression darkened, a shadow crossing his features. "Then it is fortunate you are not alone," he said. "For shadows are clever, but even they fear those who do not yield." Alara felt a flicker of warmth. Even in his presence, she had felt cold, distant, and cautious. But now, beneath the fading light, she felt a strange sense of safety, not in the absence of danger, but in the knowledge that someone else knew the weight she carried. The days turned into weeks. Alara's visions grew stronger, more vivid. She began seeing shadows that whispered secrets of the court, plots against the king, betrayals by trusted advisors, and hints of an enemy who moved unseen among the nobles. Each vision left her unsettled, yet determined. She could not ignore them, even if she wished to. Kalen, aware of the growing tension within her, invited her to join him in private council meetings. At first, she resisted, fearful of revealing her abilities. But each day she found herself drawn to him, not just because of curiosity or obligation, but because of the strange bond forming between them. He challenged her, tested her mind, and pushed her to see beyond fear. "You have a gift," he told her one afternoon as they pored over maps of the kingdom. "But a gift without control is a curse. You must learn balance, Alara, or the shadows will consume you." "I try," she said quietly, "but the visions, they are overwhelming." "They are," he admitted. "But you are stronger than you realize. I have watched you. You do not yield even when the world demands it. That is courage." Her heart thudded at his words, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun filtering through the windows. It was recognition, understanding, and something deeper, a pull that made her chest ache with longing. One evening, a messenger arrived with news that left the castle in turmoil. A neighboring lord had declared rebellion, and his forces marched toward Ashenfell. Panic swept the court, and the nobles whispered of betrayal and war. Alara felt a tremor of unease. Her visions had shown this moment, faintly, weeks before, but she had not understood its importance. Now the warning was clear. The kingdom faced danger and the enemy moved with cunning. Kalen summoned her to the war council. His gaze, as always, sought hers first. "You saw this coming," he said, not as accusation but as statement. "Yes," she admitted, "but only glimpses. I could not know when or how." He nodded, a shadow of admiration crossing his features. "Even glimpses are enough if one is willing to act." The council moved quickly, preparing defenses, sending scouts and strategizing for the looming battle. Alara worked alongside Kalen, offering insights from her visions, guiding decisions, and standing firm despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Through it all, Kalen remained near, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes observing in silence. His presence was a steadying force, and she found herself relying on him in ways she could not yet name. The tension between them grew, unspoken but undeniable, a thread of longing and trust that pulled tighter with each passing day. One night, as the castle slept, Alara wandered to the northern gardens again. The moon was full, casting silver light over the fountains and statues. She felt the stir of magic in the air, a whisper of warning and possibility. Suddenly she felt it, a shadow moving faster than it should, a presence she had not foreseen. Before she could react, a figure lunged from the mist, dagger raised. Alara's heart leapt, and instinctively her silver eyes glowed faintly. The shadow froze. Her power flared, a wave of energy that pushed the attacker back. It was enough to send him stumbling, but not far enough to neutralize the threat. Then Kalen appeared, as if from nowhere, his presence commanding and fierce. With a single motion, he disarmed the attacker, sending him crashing into the misty fountains. "Alara," he said, his voice low, "are you unharmed?" She nodded, trembling. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the realization that she had acted, that her eyes, her power, could protect, could change things. Kalen took her hand, steadying her. "You are stronger than the world allows you to believe," he murmured. "Do not forget that. Not now, not ever." Her silver eyes met his, unguarded, luminous, and full of a power she had only begun to understand. In that moment, the bond between them solidified, forged in danger, trust, and unspoken desire. Cliffhanger. The mist swirled around them, hiding figures that watched silently from the shadows. The danger was far from over, and the kingdom's secrets were deeper than either of them had imagined. The northern wind howled through Ashenfell Castle as the kingdom braced for war. Smoke rose from distant watchtowers, and the tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Alara stood on the battlements, the veil removed now, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. She had learned to trust her visions more, though each glimpse brought anxiety, uncertainty, and sometimes fear. Beside her, Kalen stood, silent and commanding. His black cloak flapped in the wind, and his dark eyes mirrored the stormy sky. He had grown closer to her over the weeks, observing her, guiding her, and perhaps unknowingly, forming a bond she had once thought impossible. The veil between them, both literal and emotional, had been lifted, revealing truths they had both hidden. "Alara," Kalen said, his voice cutting through the wind, "the enemy approaches faster than we expected. The scouts report strange forces in the forest. Not all are human." Alara's heart quickened. Her visions had hinted at this, shadows moving with unnatural speed, whispers of betrayal, and hints of creatures she had only seen once before. "I saw them," she admitted. "They are different, more dangerous than soldiers." Kalen's gaze softened as he turned to her. "Then we must prepare, and you must trust yourself." She swallowed hard. Trust herself. The words echoed in her mind. She had spent years hiding from the world, hiding from her own power, hiding from fear. Now the kingdom depended on her. And unknowingly, her heart depended on him. The army of Ashenfell gathered in the main courtyard. Soldiers trained under the dim morning light, their armor glinting with enchantments that would protect them from blade and magic alike. Alara moved among them with Kalen, her silver eyes steady, assessing, predicting, guiding. "You are calm," a captain whispered as they passed. "Most would tremble before the coming battle." Alara only shook her head. "I see the shadows," she said quietly. "I know where the danger lies. That is enough to prepare." Kalen walked beside her, his presence a shield more than any armor. He glanced at her and she met his gaze. In his eyes she saw acknowledgement, approval, and something deeper, a bond forged not just in proximity, but in understanding. She had been seen, truly seen, by the Alpha King, and in return he had let himself be seen as well. The night before the battle, Alara stood at the edge of the castle walls, staring into the dark forest. The mist moved like living creatures, curling around the trees, hiding shapes that watched silently. She could feel them, the shadows that had haunted her visions. They were close, closer than she had anticipated. Kalen appeared beside her, silent as the wind. "Do you fear them?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I fear what I might not see, what I might miss. That is more dangerous than any blade." He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Then we face it together. You are not alone, Alara, not in this, not in anything." Her chest tightened at his words, "together." The word felt like a promise, heavy and powerful. For the first time in her life, she felt that she might belong somewhere with him, with the kingdom, with the storm that approached. Dawn arrived in a wash of silver and gray. The enemy emerged from the forest like shadows made flesh, strange warriors with eyes that glowed faintly in the early light. Some moved unnaturally, faster than any human could, while others bore weapons dark with enchantments. Alara's heart pounded as she scanned the battlefield. She could see their movements before they happened, the currents of magic and malice twisting in the air. She directed the soldiers with precision, calling out warnings, positioning defenders, and using her visions to guide strategy. Kalen fought at the front, a whirlwind of strength and calculated fury. He moved with purpose, striking enemies with skill and force, commanding the soldiers without ever seeming to tire. And yet, his eyes continually sought hers across the battlefield. A silent reassurance passed between them, trust in each other, reliance and unspoken connection. At one point, a group of shadow warriors broke through the defenses, moving directly toward her. She felt the surge of magic within her, the power of her silver eyes awakening fully. Light burst from her gaze, illuminating the mist and throwing the attackers back. She raised her hands instinctively, guiding the energy, and the shadows faltered under her control. Kalen reached her side in a heartbeat, his presence steadying her, anchoring her power. "Do not fear it," he said. "Control it, trust yourself." Alara inhaled deeply and let her power flow, weaving it with the castle's enchantments. The enemy faltered, their advance slowed, and finally they retreated into the forest. After the battle, the castle was quiet but tense. Soldiers tended to the wounded, and scouts reported that the remaining forces had fled into the forest, leaving behind clues of a greater threat. Alara and Kalen stood together on the battlements, watching the horizon. "You did well," Kalen said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "You saved lives today more than you know." Alara lowered her gaze. "I only did what I could see." "No," he corrected, placing a hand over hers. "You did what others could not. You acted when others faltered." "That is courage, Alara, that is strength." Her heart raced at the touch. The battlefield, the tension, the danger, all of it seemed distant now, replaced by the warmth of his hand, the recognition in his eyes. She began, unsure what to say. Her voice faltered under the weight of everything she felt. "You do not need to speak," Kalen said, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Actions are louder than words. You have proven that today." And yet she wanted to speak. She wanted to tell him of the visions that had guided her, of the fears she still carried, of the longing that had begun to stir in her chest. But words felt fragile, inadequate against the storm of emotion between them. Days turned into weeks, and the kingdom slowly recovered. Alara trained with the soldiers and studied the castle's magic, refining her control over her visions and abilities. Kalen remained close, not just as king or protector, but as a partner in their shared purpose. They spent hours together, sometimes in council, sometimes wandering the gardens, discussing strategy, philosophy, and life. The walls between them continued to fall, replaced with trust, understanding, and a bond that neither could fully define. One evening, as the moon rose high and silver over the castle, they stood together in the northern gardens. The fountains shimmered with magical light, and the mist swirled like living spirits. "Alara," Kalen said, his voice low, intimate. "Do you understand what your power means? Not just to the kingdom, but to me." She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. I think I do," she said softly. "It is not just strength or danger. It is connection, understanding, responsibility." He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. "And yet," he said, "it frightens you, because to embrace it fully is to change everything, to change yourself." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep in her chest. She had feared her power for so long, feared the visions, feared the weight of her eyes. But with him, she felt the first stirrings of acceptance, of courage, of hope. "Then let us face it together," he whispered, taking her hand in both of his. "I will not leave you. Not now, not ever." Alara's heart ached with a mixture of fear and longing. She had never known such trust, such closeness, such possibility. And yet the shadows still lingered. The enemy had retreated, but she could sense other forces stirring, watching, waiting. The bond between them was strong, but the kingdom was not yet safe. And as the moonlight danced on the fountains and the mist swirled like spirits around them, a faint figure appeared at the edge of the garden, hidden in shadow. Alara did not see it at first, but Kalen did. His dark eyes narrowed, the hand gripping hers tightening slightly. "Trouble," he murmured. "It has followed us here." Alara felt a shiver run through her. Her silver eyes flared instinctively, glowing faintly, illuminating the garden and casting long, wavering shadows. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face she did not recognize, but a presence she immediately sensed was powerful. The air around them pulsed with energy, a warning, a challenge. "Who are you?" Kalen demanded, his voice steady but edged with authority. The strangers smiled faintly, a shadow of menace in their eyes. "I have come for the girl with silver eyes," they said, their voice low, carrying a weight that made the air itself tremble, "and for the king who dares to claim her." Alara's heart raced. She felt the pull of danger, the surge of power in her veins, and the undeniable need to protect, to fight, to survive. Kalen stood beside her, unwavering, hand still holding hers. "Then you will face us both," he said, his voice a promise as much as a command. Alara met his gaze, and in that moment she understood something deep and undeniable. They were no longer simply a king and a girl with hidden eyes. They were a force together, bound by trust, courage, and the quiet flame of something dangerous and beautiful. Cliffhanger, the stranger stepped closer, the mist twisting around them like fingers. Shadows stirred, and the night seemed to hold its breath. The battle ahead would test them, not just their power, but the bond they had forged in fire, trust, and unspoken longing. The northern mist thickened, curling around Ashenfell Castle like living tendrils. Alara's silver eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the moonlight and casting long, wavering shadows across the stone walls. She stood beside Kalen on the battlements, their hands still linked from the moment they had faced the mysterious stranger. The figure in the garden had vanished, but the air remained heavy with the pulse of unseen magic. Alara felt it deep in her chest, the stirring of danger, of power, of forces beyond her understanding. She had grown stronger over the past weeks, but this night would test everything she had learned, her courage, her control, and her bond with Kalen. "Are you ready?" Kalen asked softly, his dark eyes searching hers. His voice carried calm authority, but beneath it was something more, concern, trust, and a quiet longing. Alara nodded. "I am," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat fast. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Kalen gave a small, approving nod. "Together," he repeated, and for the first time his lips curved in a faint smile, the weight of the kingdom momentarily lifted from his shoulders. The castle gates shook under the first wave of attack. Shadowed soldiers surged forward, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Some bore weapons blackened with dark enchantments, while others were cloaked in mist, their forms barely visible. Alara inhaled deeply, letting the power in her veins rise to the surface. She closed her eyes for a moment, reaching into the visions that had guided her before, feeling the currents of danger twisting through the battlefield. When she opened her eyes, her silver gaze shone brighter than ever. The soldiers around her felt a quiet command in her presence, a silent strength that steadied their hands and hearts. Kalen moved like a storm, his sword striking with precision, cutting down those who threatened the walls. His dark eyes continually sought hers, a silent reassurance, a tether that anchored her even as chaos roared around them. "Follow my lead," he shouted, his voice booming across the battlements. Alara extended her hands, and a wave of light emanated from her eyes, pushing back the shadows, illuminating their forms and revealing weaknesses the enemy did not know they had. Together, they moved as one, king and seer, leader and protector, their powers intertwined. Hours passed like minutes. The night air was thick with the clash of steel, the roar of spells, and the cries of the wounded. Alara's visions guided her, showing paths to intercept ambushes, warning of hidden traps and illuminating the enemy's strategies. Kaelin followed her guidance flawlessly, their synergy turning the tide of the battle. At one point, the enemy's commander emerged, a figure cloaked in shadow whose presence radiated dark energy. Alara's silver eyes flared instinctively, sensing the danger he carried. "He is powerful," she whispered to Kaelin. "I see it," he said, his sword raised. "Stay close, do not falter." The commander lunged toward them, moving with unnatural speed. Alara reacted, her power flaring outward in a brilliant arc that slowed him for just enough time for Kaelin to strike. The blade met the shadowed figure, and a burst of light erupted, scattering the enemy forces into retreat. Alara stumbled slightly, her energy spent, and Kaelin caught her. "You did well," he murmured, steadying her. His dark eyes were full of admiration, and she felt a warmth in her chest that rivaled the glow of her eyes. "You were incredible," she whispered, breathless. I could not have done it without you." He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Nor could I without you, Alara. Never forget that." The dawn broke over Ashenfell, painting the castle in soft hues of silver and gold. The battlefield was quiet now, the enemy defeated or scattered. Soldiers tended to the wounded, and the castle walls bore the marks of the night's struggle. Yet, amid the devastation, there was hope. The kingdom had survived, stronger for having faced the darkness. Alara and Kaelin stood together in the gardens, the mist dissipating as the morning sun filtered through the trees. Their hands remained intertwined, the bond between them solidified by the trials they had endured. "You have changed," Kaelin said quietly, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Not just in power, but in spirit. You have embraced who you are, who you were always meant to be." Alara looked down at her hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. I never thought I could," she admitted. "I was afraid of my eyes, of what they could do, of what I could become." "You were never alone," he said, placing a hand gently on her cheek. "I have seen you truly, and I will stand with you always. Your power, your visions, your heart, they are not a curse. They are a gift. And together we can shape what comes next." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not of fear. They were of relief, of trust, and of the unspoken bond that had grown between them. For the first time she felt safe, not in the absence of danger, but in the presence of someone who understood her completely. Weeks passed in the aftermath of battle. The kingdom rebuilt, stronger and wiser, and the people's faith in their rulers deepened. Alara's role became clear, not just a seer or a noblewoman, but a guardian, a leader, and a beacon of hope. Her silver eyes, once hidden, were now revered and respected. Kaelin remained by her side, his authority unquestioned, yet tempered by the bond they shared. He had faced darkness, not just in the battlefield, but in his own heart, and he had found redemption through courage, trust, and love. Alara and Kaelin spent quiet moments together in the gardens, discussing strategy, magic, and dreams for the kingdom. The bond between them grew stronger, tempered by trials and strengthened by trust. They no longer needed words to communicate. A glance, a touch, a shared thought was enough. One evening, under a full silver moon, they stood at the edge of the northern forest. The mist swirled like living spirits, and the fountains shimmered with magical light. "Alara," Kaelin said softly, "the kingdom is safe now, but more importantly, we are free. Free of fear, free of doubt, free of the shadows that once held us." She looked into his dark eyes, feeling the depth of his words in her heart. "And we will face whatever comes next together?" she asked. "Always," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Together." Alara lifted her hands to his face, cupping his cheeks gently. "Then let the world see us as we are," she whispered. "Not hidden, not afraid, but strong, united, and unbroken." Kaelin smiled, and for the first time in years, the weight of his crown felt light. He leaned down, and their foreheads touched, a gesture of trust, respect, and love. The night seemed to hold its breath, the mist parting to reveal the first light of dawn. They stood together, hand in hand, silver eyes and dark eyes meeting, reflecting a shared destiny. The kingdom, the shadows, the battles, the fears, all had shaped them, but none could break them. They were a force together, a union of power, courage, and heart. The final test came unexpectedly. A messenger arrived with news of a distant enemy amassing power beyond Ashenfell's borders. Alara's silver eyes flared faintly, sensing the ripple of magic that heralded this new threat. She turned to Kaelin, her gaze steady. "Then we prepare," she said. "Not alone, but together." Kaelin nodded, a shadow of pride and admiration in his eyes. "Together," he repeated, and for the first time the word carried not just promise but destiny. They stood atop the battlements, the castle beneath them, the kingdom beyond, and the rising sun casting silver light across the horizon. The veil was gone, the shadows had been faced, and the power within Alara was no longer hidden. Her silver eyes reflected the dawn, strong, luminous, and fearless. Kaelin's dark eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. The bond they had forged in fire, trust, and longing was unbreakable. And as the kingdom stirred awake, filled with hope and resilience, Alara whispered more to herself than anyone else, "We are no longer hidden. We are seen, and we are unbroken." Kaelin's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow that echoed in the still morning air. "Then let the world see us," he said, "and let them know that together we are unstoppable." The mist swirled around them one final time, a silent witness to their triumph, their bond, and the dawn of a new era for Ashenfell. Together they faced the future, unafraid, united, and unbroken.